Hey, Kieran. Good
Hello.
point. I never made that explicit that we're doing that in my office. Thanks for, I'm just sending out a reminder to the class that that's where they'll be in the future.
Yeah, I forgot to clarify that
Yeah,
beforehand.
no, you're the first up, so you were the guinea pig here.
Yeah.
Uh, Let me just send this link out before I forget. So I see Jenna is here.
hmm
Do you know Jenna?
Yeah, she's in the trumpet studio with me. I
Okay,
asked a
Jenna.
couple of them to come, and I doubt many more will come. Not many
Yeah,
people
yeah.
work on excerpts yet, but
Sure. No, thanks for coming, Jenna. I didn't know you. I assumed you had an interest in trumpet playing.
Yes, I he asked me to come and he has a pretty cool project from what I can tell, so happy to be here.
I hope you'll get a chance to test some of the recordings because the proof is in the pudding. It's be great to get some feedback from people. Where are you in the program?
I'm a senior about ready to graduate with Kieran.
Oh, great. Well, you'd be the ideal candidate. Are you prepared? Are you interested in auditioning?
I've already auditioned to my master's school, which I'm going to next year, but I've taken an orchestral audition already.
Where was that?
It was in Lima, Ohio.
Oh, wow. So they have an orchestra there?
Yeah, it's fairly small, not super well known,
Would that
but
be convenient for you if you got it? Would you be able to go there?
I would, especially since where I'm going to school next year is in Ohio. It's Miami University in Oxford, so that would be nice to get an orchestral job in Ohio as well.
You bet. Okay, well, if you have any questions, we're here to entertain you. So if anything comes up, just pipe right in. And otherwise, Karen, why don't you do your thing and we'll check in when you're done.
all right. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to my presentation. My name is Kieran McNamara, and I'll be graduating this semester with a Bachelor of Music in Trumpet Performance and a Bachelor of Science in Music Media Production. And for my capstone project, that I'm presenting today, I wanted to find a way to use my MMP degree to benefit my playing and my performance. So what I came up with is what I've named the Pocket Orchestra. So what this is a set of modular play along tracks for, currently I have 11 excerpts up on the page, but that'll continue to grow over time. So yeah, in the world of like orchestral performance, you don't really get to just apply for a job and interview for it. There's the audition process. And over the past 2 or 3 decades, this process has become rather standardized, to the point where you could probably make an accurate guess of what excerpts are going to show up on what audition, to a greater extent. And because of this, um, this way that we've been doing auditions, it's I guess what I should say is that this is the way that auditions work across the board, basically. So whether you're auditioning for like a youth symphony, whether you're auditioning for a college or just an ensemble placement, it all kind of goes the same way. You walk in, you play the excerpts for a committee and walk out. And because it's become so standardized, the playing ability required to win these positions has also risen quite dramatically. In the past, people might have been able to win a job by just playing the notes and rhythms correctly, and they'd be, congrats, you're the principal of the New York Phil. You know, it wasn't a horribly difficult prospect to get hired like that. But clearly this is no longer the case. The bottom line for being accepted into these positions has gone past notes and rhythms to include everything from style, tempo, tone, intonation, really anything that they can judge you on, they will. So what a committee is looking for today is a player that can not only execute a piece to a really high standard, but also has the ability to demonstrate, even through their playing, that they know and understand the piece better than any of their competition at this audition. A good example of this would be Mark Gould, the former principal of the trumpet, or former principal trumpet of the Metropolitan Opera in New York, who won a job by showing up at the right time at the right place and playing one piece and becoming the host of one of the most sought after positions in the orchestral community. And he frequently talks about how, in his experience while he was the principal of this orchestra, that the second and third trumpet players underneath him were technically proficient beyond anything that he was capable of. But the reason that he's been able to hold on to the seat for, he retired like 5 years ago, but he had been there for a number of decades. And he was able to hold this position because he knew the pieces better than the other two. He didn't have to count the rests because he knew where the entrance was. And the real question then becomes is, how do you get to a level of proficiency to that extent? And the typical way that this is done through education and through private lessons and such is a combination of score study, listening, and getting instruction from a person who knows the industry better than you. As my trumpet professor, Dr. Campbell, frequently tells us, it's music is an oral tradition. So the details are never really written on the page. That's the base level of the music. For instance, like if you play a Stravinsky piece, a staccato in one of his pieces is brash. It's very aggressive, loud, and extremely short. If you played that in, say, a Mozart symphony, you'd get kicked out of the orchestra because it didn't fit. Classical staccatos are much more rounded. They have more space, and that level of detail is what is not shown on the page, because in both of those situations, it's just a note with a dot over it, but they have two wildly different implications. Music notation is an approximation at best. It is our way of communicating an idea to the semblance of a degree that you might be able to portray what the composer had thought. So the more information you give yourself about the piece, the closer you can get to the correct sound and style that is required. You'll have more knowledge and more things to contextualize the music. And this can be really pushed forward through score study and listening. But when you're practicing, it can be very difficult, especially if you're working on a solo excerpt, to think about what else is going on in the piece, especially when you can't actively hear it, when you're just going to have to, like, what is the second violin doing right now while I'm working on this? It might be too much to think about everything that you're doing on the trumpet in your mind and try and picture that. So to counter this, people usually try to play along with recordings. And in my experience doing this, there are a number of issues that you're going to encounter. And the first thing you'll encounter is always going to be one of two things. Either you can't hear yourself playing over the music, or you can't hear the music because you're playing too loud. It's just an unfortunate thing with that technology currently. It's also very difficult to make out individual lines. So if you have like Pines of Rome, I think in the viola, they play a significant portion of the solo with you in unison. But if you try to just put on a recording and listen for that, you're going to have a very hard time hearing that over the 60 other people playing at that point in time. The other problem, and the final thing that I always think about, is that the intonation, tempo, and style are 100% at the discretion of the recording. You have no control over that, and you never will. So once I got aggravated trying to work through listening to a recording and playing along with a recording, I sought out play along tracks for these pieces. And that leads to its own set of problems. again, I felt like I was settling for something that I didn't specifically want. I didn't go to find this, but I was making it work because I didn't have anything else to use. The problem with play-alongs a lot of the times is that they're very limited. You can't find a whole lot of play-alongs for specifically orchestral works. A lot of the times when you find play-alongs online, they are typically piano reductions of the score, and they're usually for solo pieces, not necessarily an ensemble. So it would be, this is the piano track for the Haydn, you know. It would be a very minimal interpretation of what is actually going on in the score at that time. And that is not completely helpful, especially if it's leaving out sections that might give you more information about what you need. Again, there's no control over anything. You kind of get what you get with a play along like that. Once you press play, it's going. And you run into the same issues of clarity that you would with just a standard recording. An overarching problem for both recordings and using play alongs is that they're also usually published at tempo, meaning that it is at the performance tempo and there's not really anything you can do to change that. You're expected to already know the piece. You're expected to already be able to play the piece to a high level and match their tempo. And that is not conducive to the learning process in any way. You want to start slow and work up so that you can work on getting a quality sound, quality articulation, and clarity. If you try to change the tempo on this by, say, taking it into a DAW and slowing it down, or some other means of tempo change, you're going to invariably also change the pitch of what's going on. And I mean, I probably don't need to say this, but it's at that point, it's extremely useless. Trying to play something with a different tuning system than what you're going to perform on is going to breed bad habits, and it's ultimately going to make it much more difficult for you to play it in the real life setting. You're just setting yourself up for failure at that point. It would be better just to not use it, just not practice that day, I guess, than try and force it to work. These methods are just not useful for someone starting a piece. Like I said before, they're always aimed at someone who knows it already. And the lack of effective tools to aid in the learning process is where my project really comes into play. I decided to create the practice tool that I wish I had in high school preparing for college auditions, that I wish I had in college for ensemble auditions, and what I'm hoping to use to practice for my graduate school auditions, as well as getting a professional position. Where you can't hear an individual part, the Pocket Orchestra allows you to focus in on that specific section to a greater degree. When you're stuck with a recording or play along track that's too fast or too slow, the Pocket Orchestra allows you to speed it up or slow it down to match your progress in the piece. Where a recording might have a questionable level of intonation or timing, it might color the way that you perform an excerpt. If this is what you listen to frequently, the Pocket Orchestra eliminates that by having strict time and strict tuning, which can be a benefit and a drawback, but it is certainly better to practice with something that is strict like that and learn how to imply musicality over it once you've learned it in time. In order to create the next generation of thoughtful, intelligent, and informed musicians, we need tools to make that possible. For this project, I've taken 11 excerpts for trumpet, and I broke the orchestration down into groups and individual tracks. Within these groups, you get about 10 plus options of play-along tracks at 5 tempos with the option of a click track or no click track. So to say it again, there's one that is written at tempo. There are 2 that are under tempo and 2 that are over tempo. And you get the option of having a click track with or without it, leading to 10 total files. What this allows you to do is focus your practice of the excerpt to maximize what you achieve in that practice session. There's only so many notes that brass players specifically can play in a day before the muscles in our face get too tired and progress starts to diminish. And we need to really take advantage of every opportunity to use those notes to the fullest extent that we can. Used alongside score study and listening of quality recordings of the pieces, you can prepare yourself to perform the piece with the confidence that only knowledge and practice can give you. You will solidify where you should be in the relation to your colleagues, which is an invaluable tool for any performer in any genre. To use this tool, you will go to my website, which I am putting in the chat, kbmtrumpet.com. I will also share my screen, so let me get that up. Share sound and Safari. Share. Okay, so this is my website. So from the home page, you have the options here at the top: Home, About, Store, Contact, and Pocket Orchestra. From the home page, you'll hover your mouse over the Pocket Orchestra, and you'll have a drop down of a list of composers. You can click the composer, and that'll bring you to the composers page. Now, our websites are still being developed, so I'm working on the tangential sides of things that are not directly related to my project, but I will include in my website for the benefit. So you have a picture of Bela Bartok, his name. This will eventually be biographical information about him. And then if you scroll down, you have the selected works. So for him, I used the first movement of Concerto for Orchestra. So if you click on that link, you'll be brought to the pieces homepage. And then scrolling down, you have the selection for what instrumentation you would like to have in the track that you are using at that time. So for example, we'll just click on full orchestration with all trumpets. And then you come to the page with the tracks. So you have 5 tracks with a metronome and 5 tracks without a metronome, and the 5 tempos. The middle tempo is typically the one that is the standard performance tempo for the piece. And like I said, 2 that are slower and 2 that are faster. And you would just click play on that, and you can see like there's everything for, you have it in the same way, Johannes Brahms, Academic Festival Overture. You have different selections for some of the pieces. Some pieces have more options for you to use based off of the instrumentation. Some have very minimal instrumentation during the excerpt portion, so there's only so many variations that you can have. I also took the liberty of just not making play-along tracks for, say, an instrument that only played 2 notes during that period, maybe at the start or at the end, and I didn't think that that would necessarily be beneficial to have its own track to itself, so it is included in these grouped sections: woodwinds only, strings only, low brass, and so on, and you get all of these. So here's Ottorina Respighi, Pina di Roma. Again, scrolling down, and you have these. So you have full orchestration with trumpet, without trumpet. So I'll play the slow tempo with a metronome. Each of these tracks, on all of them, start with an empty bar that is just metronome clicks, the 8th note, so that you can get yourself in time before the excerpt starts. In the case of Pines of Rome, this offstage solo starts directly on the excerpt. So once the clicks, you get 6 beats of click, and then you start playing. In other ones where it was maybe more beneficial to show the surrounding parts before and after the excerpt, I left a couple extra bars. And when I finish making the website, I will put that under the title so that it is clear where the excerpt starts, where you should start playing, and how that will work. So for example, the slow tempo with a metronome. So you kind of get the idea, and then I'll do the fast tempo without a metronome. I think it's beneficial to have both a metronome and not a metronome. So you can, one, with the metronome, you can really practice staying in time. If maybe there's a lot of held notes, there's not an implied time by the orchestration itself. It's helpful to have that. But obviously, when you go into an audition or if you're playing in a performance, there's not going to be just a metronome clicking. So you also want to have the ability to practice without that going. Let me see here. So now that we have kind of an idea of what I have made and why, let's discuss more of how I ended up creating this. And I'm going to switch my screen again. Okay. Google Slides. So the process is, it's fairly straightforward, but it's rather time consuming and a bit tedious. So the way I started was by choosing an excerpt and getting the full score for the excerpt. And then I opened a Logic Pro session. I added the tempo information. I added the instruments, and then I added time signatures. A couple of them changed, and that was an interesting thing to learn how to do, was change time signatures within a piece in Logic Pro, which I had not done before. Once I had done this, I went down part by part from the top of the score down and played each of the parts in on a keyboard. And then I applied the stock orchestral sounds from the Logic Pro into it. So after I had added all of the instruments and the parts that they were playing, I started the second step, which was exporting the files. Each track is an individually bounced MP3 file with a unique instrumentation, tempo, and metronome or no metronome. Each track was exported 10 times, giving the 5 different tempos with a metronome and without a metronome. Just to export all of the files and their respective iterations, it took about 26 hours and amounted to about 1,030 files currently. The next step was to create each page on my website, which was just as tedious, route them all together into an efficient and cohesive way that managed to make it so you can navigate the website without too much trouble. Everything kind of is linked together to a degree. After this, I started individually uploading each of those MP3 files to its respective place, relabeling them, reorganizing them to be structured properly on the page itself. And that took just as long as, if not longer, than exporting all of the files. And this is really where the project is now. So talking about where I would like to go with this moving forward, what my plans are with it. So I'm going to keep working on this project. I fully believe in this, and I'll keep working on it to develop it further throughout the next few years. Right now, I would consider this like a first prototype. It's functional. It's not pretty, but it's functional, and it can work, and it demonstrates the mechanisms that I want to be present in the tool to a degree. What I would like to do moving forward with it is, one, I would like to offer a full changeable range of tempos. I would like you to be able to, if you really wanted to, just be able to bump it up 1 beat per minute at a time, so that you can really customize how that works. Now, clearly the problem with that is I'm not going to have, 200 hyperlinks for one version of the track. So what has to happen for that is I need to create a new interface. And what I would like to have is like a box that has all of the instruments in it with a toggle next to each of them that says on off, and then a knob next to that to select tempo. And depending on these parameters that you select, it will choose the listed MP3 file that corresponds with all of that, and you will be able to play it. I think that that would be an effective way to, one, minimize the amount of pages, clean up the appearance of the website, and add functionality to the tool. obviously, I'm going to continue to make more excerpts and upload them as I finish them. Eventually, I would like to start covering works for other instruments. I feel like this is a vital step in the life of this project. I think that that will categorically improve the user base. Instead of just being limited to trumpet players, it would be any musician doing anything orchestrally. And I would even be open to doing things that are not orchestral, maybe like jazz tracks or any sort of Broadway. Broadway is another big employer of instrumentalists right now. And then the distant goal of recreating entire symphonies, so that if you really wanted to, you could just play down a symphony with a track. I think that that would be fun, but that's a bit of a daunting task that I think would have to wait a while to figure out a more effective way to upload and operate the website. I also believe that it will increase the user base if I use a higher quality patch. The stock Logic sounds are, they're useful, but they are not the most wonderful thing to listen to in the world. I've been thinking about the Berlin Strings patcher. There's a Cinematic Sounds, also has a very high quality sample-based patch. That would be, all that I would have to do is basically attach it to the tracks that I've already made and then rebounce them and re-upload them. So it'd be a simple fix, but it would increase the aural beauty, I guess, of the tool. Yeah, like I said, it's a bit Spartan with the stock plugins right now, but it works and it's understandable. One pipe dream, I think, for this project that I have would be hiring a live orchestra and then having them record them in track by track, but that would be quite a financial investment, I believe, as well as a daunting task for any musician, that any poor soul that gets attached to that project. Yeah. So another thing that I would like to improve about this is the delivery method. Like I started the project with the intent of making an app until I found that that would be a ludicrous proposal in the short period of time that I had had to work on it. A couple months wasn't going to cut it to create a fully functional app. So the website is great and it is mobile optimized. You can, it restructures the site when you use it on mobile versus using it on a web page. But yeah, I would eventually like to use a mobile app version of this. Now going back again to the website. So in the Pocket Orchestra, on the composer pages, like I've said here, I would like to have this with biographical information. I would also like to have a list of suggested biographies and reading material if you want a more in-depth idea of the composer and their work, so you can contextualize what you're playing even more, which I find to be very helpful. And one thing that I've struggled with when I go after looking for a biography is I'm never sure where to start. But if I find them and put them on the website, that might be incentive enough for someone to go want to read it. I think that would be very helpful. And alongside the composer page, but also the excerpt page and the page for the piece itself, I would like to have maybe a audio file next to each of them that it gives a pronunciation, an audible pronunciation of the piece, the composer, and the work. Because I know I look like a bumbling idiot 90% of the time when I have a foreign composer that I have to ask my professor about. And that's never fun. So again, creating informed and intelligent musicians is the goal. And then with the excerpt page, let's go down here. Whoops. Any of these will do. Actually, it's this one. I was wrong. So on this page itself for the piece, like I said, I would like the pronunciation to be available. This one is not necessarily difficult, but it might be for someone that isn't an English speaker from the beginning. I would also like to include suggested recordings. I want to embed Spotify links into the page so that you can, I'll give my suggestions, and it will be said suggestions, or I'm sure I'll hear from 100 angry trumpet players that I chose the wrong recording or something. And then also a suggested equipment, like this is typically played on C trumpet, and you might want to have a fiber mute for the excerpt, stuff like that. The goal is to create a page where you don't have to go anywhere else, and you can get all the information you would need to properly perform and practice the piece. And going along with that, maybe tips on performance, like you want to listen to this instrument because it will lead you to be in greater time in the overall structure of the piece. Now this one I'm not so certain on, just for like copyright issues. All of the images and stuff that I have on my website right now, I chose specifically because they're public domain, but a lot of pieces are not, and that will be a limiting factor in what I can and can't do. But I would like to, if possible, when things go into public domain, is to have a PDF of that section of the score available on this page, as well as a PDF of the excerpt itself on this page, as well as a glossary of terms for anything that's in the excerpt. If it's in German, Italian, French, to have the translation right there, minimizing the amount of places that you have to go look for information. It can all be in one place and create a more cohesive picture. The last two things that I wanted to improve. So the index of composers is not finished. That'll be a page that will have all of the composers I've used, and hyperlinks to their page on my website. And then the requests tab, I will have, you will have the ability, if you want a certain excerpt that isn't on the site, you can reach out and ask for me and I'll produce it. If there's a problem, you can say that. If you like anything, it's requests. There'll be a form attached to that so that you can reach out to me. And really the last thing that I've thought about with this project is marketing. So I personally am more than happy to just kind of leave it open as free use resource. I don't know. I wouldn't get rich off of selling this by any standard. So I think it would be greater for my goal of education to make it open for everyone. Maybe with the possibility of putting a Patreon account to help fund keeping the site up, because I believe I'm paying, I think, $26 a year. I mean, it's nothing, or $20 for the domain a year, and then I think $18 a month to host the site. So covering those costs would definitely be a goal, so that I'm just not paying for it out of pocket. In theory, I could sell them as packs. So like you could have the composer pack and you would buy all of the excerpts on the site. You'd buy access to all excerpts on the site for, say, Respighi. You could have like the Roman trilogy pack that would have, you know, Pines of Rome, Roman festivals, and Fountains of Rome, stuff like that. You can do that with an endless amount of like period packs or country specific or types of pieces and stuff like that. And then I guess the last idea I had for marketing is making the site, if I did make it a pay to use sort of thing, I would want it to be more subscription based, like $5 a month and you get full access to everything. I think that is a good cost wise to fund the site without asking too much of the user base. And that's really all I have for you guys. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Sure, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you would want there to be a full range of tempi available. So would you limit this? For like example, I don't imagine anyone practicing Bizet's Carmen at 120 because that's just not right. So would you keep it like realistic, like what is possibly going to be performed practice wise, or would you make it available for all tempi?
There would definitely be a limit on that. I clearly, with that excerpt specifically, I would be more inclined to make the low end much more prevalent. I would probably say that there should be a cap as to how fast it should go, like maybe 80 if you're feeling real spicy about it, but even that seems a bit ridiculous. So it would change based on the excerpt. Like I have different selections for what you can play for each excerpt. That would be another thing that would be specific to each thing. But yes, yeah. I would limit that.
Awesome. That was my only question.
Jenna, what sort of low range would you want would be most helpful to you? Like, do you want to start really slow and then gradually speed up, or like really slow, medium, and then full tempo?
I guess it would depend on the excerpt. So like for the Bizet, since it is such a slow excerpt, you would want to practice it a little faster, not too fast, because if you practice it, say 120, it's out of style. It's like you're not going to be practicing the correct thing. But for the slower type of, the slower, specifically the slower excerpts, you would want there to be a more lower end of tempi and less higher end. But like for faster excerpts, having a lower tempo is also just as beneficial because getting that technique is necessary in order to facilitate the excerpt right. So I mean, I would just, I think my question was more geared towards like slower excerpts because you don't really want to practice them too fast without sacrificing style and other aspects. But I think, yeah, it's like, I was just more curious as to whether or not you would limit the top half of slower excerpts.
Yes, slow tempos or changing the tempo seems good, or slow tempo is good for pitches and durations and stuff like that. But once you start doing the style, I agree, it's better to be pretty close to the performance tempo.
Mm-hmm.
What seems most intriguing about this? What do you think you would be most interested in using it for? Would it be researching about the composer and stuff like that, or?
I personally am more interested in practicing along with the tracks. That is very beneficial for performance majors. There's many times where I wish I could find a recording of, say, Petrushka at 80 clicks instead of 116, so I can actually practice along with an orchestra. And that just, it doesn't exist because there's no recordings that are available at like 80 clicks per minute. So I would definitely use the Pocket Orchestra for the tracks. However, I think that all the other things that he had on there, like the biography, those are really important. Say if you're just wanting to research the pieces and delve further into it, like everything he said, I would use. Like those are all very important aspects when you're studying composers' pieces and everything. Like those are all the basic things that performance majors need to know in order to perform the music correctly.
Do you think you would want to mute the clarinets or just do it with the string part? Any of that sort of thing would be useful, or does it even matter, and would just a piano reduction be enough as long as you could change the tempo?
I think that selecting certain instrument groups is very helpful, especially when you're focusing on intonation. And if, say, you need to listen to that exact line in order to follow along with. So like he mentioned the Pines of Rome excerpt, the strings have they move when you don't move. So having those, especially like the violins and the violas, having those types of instruments specifically chosen and playing along with those, that would be more helpful than saying the whole orchestra, at least when you're starting out.
Even if you're not only using it for audition preparation, I can see how all that sort of options could really increase your appreciation and understanding of the piece. Kieran, is this orchestral stuff that you're focusing on? So the trumpets, it's not trumpet solos necessarily, it's trumpet in the ensemble.
For the purpose of this, it is definitely more geared as a tool for understanding the ensemble in relation to what you're playing. But I mean, I definitely like the idea of putting up like piano reductions of solo pieces and stuff so that you can practice away from an accompanist and stuff like that.
No, I was just thinking being able to just play with the clarinets or with the clarinets and the violas or something, that could make it really interesting so you really understand the piece. And if you got the gig and you're in the ensemble, your listening would be so much more developed. You're listening for all these different parts, not just what's the beat and where does it get faster.
Yeah, it's all about contextualizing yourself within the group.
So then you know, you're back to that goal of you understand the piece better than your competition, or not even
Yeah.
if you're competing, just enjoyment of musician.
Hmm.
Jen, is
Exactly.
there anything else that you think would be helpful to have in this?
He has done a phenomenal job on this, honestly. Like, there's a lot of options, and even though it's not all on there right now, like necessarily like the how to say certain things, or you know, the definitions of certain words that we might not know, like all those ideas that he wants to implement, like he's nailed it in my opinion. I mean, I really can't think of anything else that I would want.
I didn't, that the pronunciation guide's new, Karen. I hadn't heard you talk about that. I think that would be helpful that you don't walk out on stage saying, I'm now going to play the Belay Bertuk excerpt. You know, it's like, that's going to make people, you know, be
Like,
skeptical.
Yeah.
Are there going to be some little trumpet solos, even if it's an ensemble piece? You're going to do some excerpts where the trumpet gets a solo?
Yeah. I think that would be great.
that would be fun. That'd be helpful.
Anything else, Jenna?
Nope, that wonderful job.
Would it be okay with you if I put this on YouTube and as an unlisted file, just in case an MMP student someday is interested in watching his presentation?
I'm fine with that, yeah.
All right. Well, Kieran, I'll send you some comments. I thought you did a great job. I think you really found something that combines your skills in these different areas, and it's really a service what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
I thought you was a very articulate presentation, so great. Most of my suggestions are things like maybe you could find some other trumpet professors who might want to contribute a little video explanation comments on a piece. If you've
Yeah.
got 30 pieces, you might find 30 trumpet players who would each give you 5 minutes of video.
Yeah.
And
I think that would be a good
that
idea.
could be a good recruiting tool for them. And they might even get some like remote teaching gigs out of it. So
Mhm.
there'd be a little win-win. And if you're making it free, you know, do it out of Creative Commons or something. And if everybody contributes a little bit, imagine what this can do for the trumpet community.
Yeah, I think that would be a wonderful idea.
And I think your market can be bigger than just the auditioning. It's good to focus on a niche and solve a problem, but there's so many trumpet players out there, I would think, that could enjoy doing this, whether they're preparing an audition or not, that might be a bigger market.
Yeah.
Well, excellent work. We're off to a good start. And Jenna, thank you so much for coming. And I think, oh, also, Kieran, you talked about your plans for the future, but I didn't hear anything about finding testers. So I think that should be your number one thing, is getting Jenna to try it and getting her feedback. And you've spent, you know, tens of hours doing this now, and I wouldn't go any farther till you've spent that much time or more getting people to try it out and getting feedback from them.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much and have an excellent evening.
Thanks. You
Till
too.
next time, good luck with your studies, Jenna, and your audition and everything. You're going to do well, I can tell.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.